So the expectations are pretty high, so I hope I will not fall apart with the first step to switch on here the power knob. So thank you all for coming in this wonderful city, which is a pretty hot city, I realized. So we don't have this, I would say, in Europe right now. Whomever I call from my lab, whether it's in Davos or in Düsseldorf, they say, oh, it's raining, 13 degrees Celsius out there. We want to have at least a little bit of the summer. I said, are you looking outside? Great here, hot, and I like it. Anyway, so please feel free to interrupt me when you don't understand. Nothing is more boring when you fall asleep, and I'm realizing it because you do not understand because I'm talking somewhere in the skies. So interrupt me, put the questions, I will try to answer. I admit there may be questions which I can't answer like this, and I need to figure out what is the detail and what to do. And in this respect, let's start with this here. I think I was missing this in your talk right now, that this is the central thing, that we want to give you something which you have an immediate effect and not only waiting for months and years in chronic use to experience what nutraceuticals can do. And I would like in the first part to explain you a bit about the technology and its applications, and later on I will go into the products and specifically highlight what they are doing. Should we darken it or dim down, or we can make it?
We were trying just to shut off the middle ones, but
here is it not? Here it isn't.
No, we found it. Just keep going, Wolfgang.
Okay, that's good. No, it's fine. I will later on. I will need it. Okay. I hope everybody of you took this, what is there on the table. It's the water. As you realize, you don't feel very comfortable in this environment if you don't drink. And since millions of years, life is happening in water. I don't know whether there's something out there in the galaxies without water. It's hard to imagine. The water is essentially that where all our metabolism, it's called, all what we do is happening. Whether it's your muscle work, your heart work, your liver work, or your brain, it's all happening in a water environment. We are not, we are consisting at about 83%, I believe, is the percentage out of water, and we need the rest to not fall apart when there's a rain outside. However, all the processes are in the water environment. And so you run into problems if you deal with some important factors which are not soluble in water. As you experience every day in the kitchen, when you put oil in a pot for noodles, you see it swimming on top of the water and not mixing with the water. And the same is true here, not only for fatty compounds, but for certain vitamins. They were already mentioned: vitamin A, beta-carotene, vitamin D, vitamin E, cofactor Q10, and these so-called omega-3 fatty acids, which you may have heard have a great benefit. I will come to this later. These things are not mixed with water. And the consequence, and I will explain it in a second, is a low bioavailability, meaning you cannot use them properly. Meaning, to get an effect, you need more. As Matt said, you need 60 pills instead of 6. You have a problem most often with the taste, because the more you take, everything is a question of dosing. And you may have some tolerability issues when you dose it too high in your gastrointestinal tract or in your systemic body. So coming from the pharmaceutical world, and as Matt mentioned, I have also a 25-year or longer career in pharmaceutical and biotech industry. And since 3 years, I'm working on nutraceuticals and cosmetics. And frankly saying, I was somewhat shocked when I was reading all the statements about the products, and then I tried to figure out whether it's really true, what is happening here, and what these things. And most of these statements are really not valid. Or you look at a label and it's telling you you have an RDA level or 800 units of vitamin D. What does it really mean? What does it mean if you say you need 40 units or 15 units or so microgram for vitamin E, and you know only 10% of this is taken up? So there's a waste of resources. This is the minor problem. The problem starts when you need the stuff and you don't get it. And as I just told you, it's all about bioavailability. What does it mean? So frankly saying, if you go from scientific point of view, what you could do with pharmaceuticals, and unfortunately you most often cannot do it with nutraceuticals, you inject something, you measure what is in your blood circulation over the time, and you call this 100% value. And now you take it orally, as a tablet, as a shot, or you put it on your skin, and then you determine also the compound in the blood, and then you see what is in there. And let's say The fun factor starts when in pharmaceuticals when you target something like 20–30% when you eat a drug in your body. The 70 other percent are excreted. And we want to achieve a much higher level. And in most cases, as I told you, fat-soluble compounds are only taken up by 10%. So they have a really low bioavailability, which is fine. But when I look all in your faces, there are some beautiful faces, men and women, and you are younger than ever, but you are slightly above 21 years old. When we start losing our first teeth, and then the whole thing deteriorates. And one problem in the aging organism is the reduction in taking up lipid-like compounds, because simply it falls apart a bit. And then you're missing these type of things, and they are essential. And the same is true for cosmetics, even worse, because they are exposed to the world. So imagine the ultraviolet light hitting your skin, destroying the compounds. Or imagine you dissolve these things nicely, then the alcohol or whatever it is, it goes away, and imagine this crystallizes your compound and it's like sandpaper on your skin. I don't think that you like it. Okay, let's go back in a bit into science and what happens every day, every night in your body. We call it digestion. And it starts here in the mouth cavity. Normally, it's not only chopping the meals and making it smaller, but if you, for example, take a piece of bread and you chew it for 5 to 10 minutes, it will start getting sweet, because you already break down these big molecules, this starch, for example, and it becomes sugar. And then you get the sweet feeling. So here it already starts the process of digestion, then it goes down to the esophagus, and it ends up in the stomach, and then in the intestine. So you may perceive the intestine as a long tube, about, if I remember correctly, 25 meters or 70 meters, I don't know precisely. However, it's much more. It's a huge, huge surface, 2,700 square feet. So this is your intestine, because you have not only a tube, but you have some villi, you have some major clefts and fields, and on each of the cells which are sitting on the one side to the, let's say, here would be the inner side of the intestine, then you have here the cell layer of your cells, and here's the blood and the lymph. And this surface is then 2,700 square feet. And this, why I'm stressing this, this surface is covered, and this is a take-home measure, by a very thin layer of water. Each and every cell there is covered by water. Now, what happens when the water is? Remember the experiment with the noodles. You pull in the oil. What happens? The oil sits on top. It doesn't come here through. It needs to go here. It has to become close to the cell. And it doesn't. And we would die immediately, and unfortunately babies are dying directly after birth if they do not have one organ, which is very important, and you are always thinking negative about it. It's the bile and the gallbladder. It's a very important organ because it produces some sort of a tensid. It produces bile salts which are able to dissolve these fatty molecules, these vitamins, and surround them with something we call a micelle. And they are able, let's say, to make these fat-soluble compounds water-soluble. They put it into a cage. From the outside world, they can be diluted in water. And from the inside, they have the fat-soluble compound stored. So saying so, these little droplets formed naturally every day, every night, by the help of bile salts, are able to pass this water film, going to the epithelial cell, melting into the membrane of these cells, releasing the ingredients, the vitamins, and then go from there into the blood and to the lymph. I will show you in a moment also an example of this. So this is a process which works, but as I told you, it works for 10%, for 15% of the fat-soluble compounds. Because it is not made in a laboratory, it's not optimized. What we are doing more or less from the technical point of view the same thing. We are forming these little cages, these cells which have in the inside these fat-loving molecules, and the outside the blue caps are representing the water-loving surface, so we match both worlds together. And you can do it in various ways, and some of you have heard, most likely, and if you Google, you see that micelles are out there for 30, 40, 50 years in industrial application. So I wouldn't be here if we wouldn't have something very special. And what is so special about? I wanted to show you. And now we go a little bit into physics. So if you make in your big pot in the laboratory a concentrated solution of micelles, It's all fine. They swim here around in the water pot. And you have to perceive these are not fixed cages, but they exchange their parts, these molecules, these little things, they exchange with each other. And there's no problem. The net result is always the same because they are densely packed. Now, when you dilute them, they start a bit to fall apart. And if you dilute them further, they shrink. And if they are below the so-called critical micelle concentration, then they disintegrate completely. And what happens then is that your content of the whole thing falls, sediments, crystallizes, is not water soluble. The vitamins are without that protective hull. So you have no micelles. The rest is disintegration. Why I'm stressing this point? This is a problem which each micelle, natural micelle, has. And now think back what I said. You have a huge, huge surface on which you dilute all your ingredients. So you can be damn sure you are below the critical micelle concentration. That's the reason why this process of the natural process is only yielding up with 10%, 15% uptake. So what we are able to do, we keep these micelles stable below this critical micelle concentration. That means they have really the chance to meet with the lipid membranes of your epithelial, of your cells of the intestine, and from there go to the lymph. This is a patent about and the technology. It is described in a patent. The patent is granted in Europe already. The Americans have a little bit more work to do, despite the fact they have a fantastic building. I was just last week in the patent office in Washington, but it will cost us some time to get it granted. That's only part of the whole thing. I only want to tell you there's much more behind it. There's a know-how. The patent is one thing, but what to do with the whole thing and how to do it and to set it up, that is internal know-how. And as Matthew said, Matthew and I were fighting in the beginning very much with the investors whether to buy a production site or not. And I'm more than happy that we have it, that we got a very smooth technology transfer and we know precisely what's doable. And if I spend in the evening on a Skype call with my colleagues in St. George then some hours on discussing because certain things do not work out like they should do, then we can solve it very openly and we have it under full control. Well, so far the technology. Now let's see, does it really work? And I want to convince you on some examples. And starting with the pharmaceutical stuff is the first slide. So we adapt in Switzerland this technology also for pure pharmaceuticals, nothing what we do here. But only as an example. Usually when a chemist is bringing into biology lab in a pharmaceutical industry, whether Pfizer or whomever or Bayer, a new compound, you can be sure by 90% it's soluble like stones. And you are looking to your powder, sometimes it's yellowish, sometimes greenish and whatever, and you don't get it into solution. And you wonder what you are doing on testing here. What is this? It is more or less, I mean, I made some studies which I was not allowed in my company to publish because, I mean, we are in the fog. We are somewhere in the woods. We try to do the best, but we fail in most of cases. I can tell you 80% of all compounds not developed further fail because they are not soluble. And unfortunately, the resources in the big companies for making things soluble are in a very late stage, not in the early stage where it should be. I was fighting for this for years. I didn't achieve it. Anyway, we tried to do it. We took this compound, which was completely non-soluble in water, only partially soluble in alcohol, and whatever we did, we made our technology, and you see here, this is the unformulated material when we give it to mice orally, and that is the concentration which we achieve when we do the formulation. So it really works. It's 10-fold higher for something which is nearly zero when you give it to mice. It was only doable with this technology. Other technologies failed. And now we go to a real Viz example. And this is something which you will hear in the next couple of months, most likely more often, because we will have a product based on this, what I show you right now. In the 50s of the last century, you may have heard about that there were some epidemiological studies out there indicating that certain populations have a much lower rate of inflammation and a much lower rate of cardiovascular problems. And these were the Inuit. And the researchers were wondering what's happening. And it turned out that is most likely one basic mechanism, because they eat fish, they eat fish, they eat fish, and they eat some krill and whatever, prawns. So if everybody is doing it, it's fine. And they have really drastically reduced diseases like we have it. And why is it? Because in this krill oil or fish oil, Krill is one before the fish oil. It starts with the algae, then it goes to the krill, and then to the fish. And we are using predominantly krill by technical reason and by the homogeneity and some other reasons. It contains 3 compounds. It contains much more, but I want to focus only, let's say, at the end of the day, I will focus on 2. It has astaxanthin, which is a very powerful antioxidant. It has some very nice effects which are not yet fully explored, but there are more and more data out there that this is important stuff for boosting energy and preventing the cardiovascular system. But they have this famous omega-3 fatty acid, or called essential fatty acids. And I only want to bother you with the 2 abbreviation. I can give you the full name of it, but I think you will not take it. This docosahexaenoic acid and icosapentaenoic acid. Why I'm so fluent with it? Because I spent 8 years of my life in the university not knowing about this stuff, but trying to understand some mechanisms in inflammation. Because what happens here? If you are exposed to some inflammatory stimuli, for example, you get a bacterial infection because of a wound, or you are dealing with some sour throat and get a bacterial infection there. Then you attract certain inflammatory cells, these white blood cells, which are your guardians of your immune system. They are fighting against bacteria. And that's good because they can kill bacteria. Unfortunately, they also are alerted and they are sending out messages to other cells, please come help. They attract other inflammatory cells. And then you get a red spot, which hurts, it's swollen. It's the typical signs of inflammation. And one of the most prominent molecules your body is synthesizing, making in course of an inflammation, is the so-called arachidonic acid. And I spent really 8 years and dealing with septic patients on this. This arachidonic acid on an inflammatory stimuli is released from these white blood cells and converted immediately to very, very powerful molecules. If I would inject you these molecules, you would die immediately under the impression of a septic shock. That's exactly the septic shock what happens. Okay, the arachidonic acid is a bit of a bad guy. And what you can do, what was figuring out, now with this one molecule out of the omega-3 fatty acids, the EPA, you can replace in your cells this arachidonic acid. It's very similar. It's only a very minute difference, but nature recognizes this. If then an inflammatory process starts, then you will not produce it anymore. So you replace this arachidonic acid by EPA. That means if you would take EPA to you in form of fish oil, krill oil, you would have a lower chance to produce this stuff here. That's the whole story for one of the ingredients. The problem is, do it. And there are numerous studies out there indicating how it works. There's only one thing. You have to do it. You have to eat 1 to 10 grams of fish oil, krill oil per day. And I don't know who ever tried it. You would, I think if you would have done it today, you would separate from each other because you're a little bit stinky. And the reason for this is it's an oil. And it's simply not absorbed. So when we decided to take these 2 molecules, or the whole krill oil in all its entity, and adapt our technology on it. And we tried to do it. And the problem what we had, we did it 2 years ago already, 3 years ago with fish oil, and we were happy to succeed with it. Problem was we got the next batch of fish oil, it was completely different, and we started again and again. So with the krill oil we have a much higher homogeneity, and chemically it's also better to use krill oil than fish oil in a way. So what we tried to say, okay, hey, let's make the solubilizate, let's make a product out of it, and let's test whether we get it into the blood as we want to have it, in a much lower amount. So what we did, we took a formula with the VizPure technology and took only less than half a gram of krill oil, formulated it in a shot, blended it with some nice smell and taste, and some other things, and we used then 5 top athletes, actual soccer players. In the US we would have taken basketball players, so sorry. They were not available at this quality. So we took them and we gave them 28 days the krill oil. And then we decided we do not want only to look into the blood, whether we see the whole stuff there rising, but we wanted to look also for one important parameter, which is in the last, I would guess, 5 to 10 years, becoming more and more important. It's a so-called, it's a little bit esoteric, it sounds, it's stress index. So stress index tells you more or less the ability of your cardiovascular system for your heartbeat to adapt to a stress condition, you have to run, you have to do exercises. You are like me right now with 3,000 RPM looking to your faces, trying to get you interested. And then after the talk, I will drink a beer and I go down and I will relax. And most often the people cannot do it anymore. That means they shrink the variability, the so-called heart rate variability. And with some nice computer software based on Microsoft or what, you can really measure it, and you will realize that people who cannot adapt properly are prone to infectious diseases, are prone to cardiovascular complications, and are prone to less good healing. It's out in the literature by independent scientists all over. I didn't know about this some years ago when I studied medicine.
Did you do treadmill testing?
Pardon me?
Did you do treadmill testing for the stress?
No. It's just the people lay down actually, and you measure this over a certain period of time. So it's a sophisticated software behind it with quite reliable data behind it. Okay. Let's see what the data can tell you. So we measured the fatty acid composition in the blood. And indeed, if you look to the ratio of arachidonic acid with the EPA, we want to increase this here, meaning this bar should get lower. You see, this was a starting point, and in these 5 athletes, at the end of the day, we really achieved that we could exchange the arachidonic acid versus the EPA. So that's blood cosmetics. I'm too long in blood in pharmaceutical industry, I think, tell you can make wonderful effects and showing in the blood. We want to see, is there biology around? Is there something really happening worth to do so? And we measured this stress index. These sport people, they were in front of tough competitions. Actually, it was later on the champion in Switzerland in soccer. They were under stress like hell. And you see, they had, all of them in this 28 days came down. This is a logarithmic scale. So this is times 10 always. Because they were so individually different, I couldn't bring it in another format. So what we achieved here is clearly saying, yes, our technology, despite the fact others are using 2 to 10 grams of krill oil, fish oil, we are using half a gram. We achieve the same effects in the blood. And on top, we get the biology rightly done. So this is one of the key data we have. We will repeat the study. We will increase the study. We will look for other parameters, but only giving you some sort of an example of this. And now this is all very theoretical. And when you have your customers out there, now let's go to the multi-level marketing. What I really love here is to explain the technology, but I don't know whether you have always 1 hour time. So my whole talk is about 5 hours, so don't worry. We can do this. And I come to your question in a moment. I want to show you what you can demonstrate to your customers, this effect. I have here 2 glasses with water, which is in this package, which we have here for everybody of you in this set. And what we do herein, we take a raw material in alcohol. Actually, we do frankincense. Frankincense, I don't know, do you know what it really is?
No.
So frankincense is something by which the Catholic Church is always spoiling the environment. You have smoke. That's one thing. If you love it, it's fine. I'm evangelic. I was once in a Catholic church in Christmas, and I tell you, I was nearly dying because of the smell. I couldn't stand it. However, it's long around there. As you may remember, the 3 gifts for Jesus were myrrh, frankincense, and gold. And the Empress of Saba, she became rich by multi-level marketing selling frankincense, not gold. She had a monopoly because this tree, the Boswellia tree, is only growing in very, very rare habitats. Oman, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and in India. So that's where it all comes from. When you buy it, you get stuff like, I can show you later, I have it with me, which is like pebbles. It's a resin. It's out of this tree. It's earned from the trees, and it's getting hard. And when it's liquid, it's sticky like hell. So what we do in our laboratories, we extract the whole thing via alcohol. That's the only thing which is allowed, because you can do harsh chemicals, but then you spoil everything, you can't use it. And out of this, we are then able to take this resin to make it water soluble. And what I show you right now is not the frankincense, but something else, because this is propolis. It's another resin. Who knows what is propolis?
Bees.
Okay, propolis is from the bees, and it's a very interesting story. There are certain subpopulation in a beehive which are going out to the trees and taking these resins, mixing it with their own body fluids, come back to the beehive and seal the the how do you say, the small cages where the larvae are in. Huh?
The shells.
Cells, yeah. You put it in and it's protected, it's water protected. So no microorganisms can enter the thing from the outside, otherwise the whole beehive, the population would die. But now imagine the fact there's a mouse running into the beehive, unfortunately. So it's killed immediately, but then you have the corpse there with all the parasites, the bacteria, the fungi, the viruses, and everything would spoil around. So the propolis has very powerful anti-inflammatory and anti-infective effects. It's very well described that you can treat viral infections. It has antifungal antifungal activity and antibacterial activity. Problem is, it's still a resin. It's only dilutable in alcohol. So when you look for some rare reports where people are really using it, then they're using it topically in a way. Systemically, it doesn't work. Why it doesn't work? I show you now. This is propolis, and I will let it go around that you smell this wonderful, that's really nicely smelling. This is a propolis extract which we prepare in Davos. And it is, when you would, I don't know whether you can see it, it's clear, it's dark brownish, and it's an alcohol extract. You get sometimes products which have even particles in it because they are not properly cleaned and whatever. So if I take this here and put this into water, I mean this is clean, clear, brownish. If I do this here, you see what happens. It's getting really dramatically yellowish, it separates, it's ugly. And if I wait, then you have the whole resin on top of it. You can pull it out with a finger, you have it between your fingers, and it's sticky. So this is what happens if you would drink all these propolis solutions which are on the market. So now, I give it to you. You can look at it, you can smell it, you can look to it. And now it comes, the second pot has the same propolis starting material. Now we make our solubilizate out of it. And this you can demonstrate with the frankincense in this bag, in this set yourself. You will see the same results. Now look on this. Here you put it in. And it's getting completely clear and clean. And it's completely water soluble. You can drink this. It will have an effect. I will tell you one nice example out of this, what we did. Propolis is a mixture out of 70 to 90 components. And it's very difficult to buy it right now. Therefore, we do not have a product right now here because the market is dry. A lot of beehives or bee population are dying. To get propolis in the quantities we need is a challenge. We will achieve this, but we need some time. Davos, I told you, is a very nice town in the middle of the Alps. And there's one famous event every year taking place. It's end of January when it's bitter cold there. It's the so-called World Economy Forum, where all the guests, I mean, it's always interesting to see the guests from the year before because then you see what happened. So Mark Zuckerberg was a shooting star. I think in 2013 he may not be the shooting star anymore. All the presidents are coming, the company presidents are coming, the bosses of the governments are coming. All they're talking about a lot the future and how to save the world. And they feel they are all shaken up because nobody knows the future of the world, and there are some crazy people who may do harm to these people. So the Swiss army, strong as it says, no, protect you all. 5,000 soldiers up into the mountains. And all packed, because Davos is small. It's a small valley, left, right side, high hills. So what happens there? First soldier, it's end of January, starts sneezing. 3 days later, half the battalion is sneezing and falling apart. And the staff doctor had always 30% ill soldiers. So he came to Hans-Peter, as we said, it's in the middle of the main street, the most stupid place to make a company. Left side, expensive jewelry. Right side, expensive watches. And in the middle, our pharmacy. So the staff doctor came to Hans-Peter, my colleague, the pharmacist, and said, hey, don't you have something? And he said, yes, I have something. So we made a mixture, and it's a lozenge in this case, but you can make also solubilizate some solid stuff. And it's a lozenge out of propolis and ginseng. And we have it in written from the staff doctor over years. The infection rate dropped from 30% to 3%. And we know it because we have it in Europe on the market. Only to show you get a systemic effect. It's not sitting here in the mouth cavity. The immune system is triggered. I can present you most likely in a half a year the precise mechanism when we have elucidated. I have some ideas because I worked in this area pretty long. Anyway, telling you about the technology. If you have now some urgent questions to this, I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, I take a little bit of pure water. Let's come to the most important thing, to the products. I think what I would try to convince you is that we have the technology, which Hans-Peter and his team developed and adapted it. Because Hans-Peter, he is a compound pharmacist, and he was running all pharmacies for all the hospitals in Davos. And Davos has the highest density of hospitals in whole Europe, by tradition. In my last slide, I will show you why. And the other thing is the knowledge what to do. I mean, to have a Ferrari with slicks in rain is not really helpful. You need to bring the PS on the street. So we have the biggest recipe collection in Switzerland besides the authorities, out of which we have developed new recipes. We are sending out in Davos every day 50 packages to individual patients, to individual pharmacies for these things. That's the knowledge we have. And he is a natural pharmacist, so he has a lot of experience on natural extracts. So all what you see here is this concept, having something basic here, so men's and women's complete, and around this some spots for specific purposes. This is developed in Switzerland and fine-tuned now here for US here on this side. So it's nothing that you don't should. What I wanted to tell you is that, or to change your impressions that we have this product only here for 3-4 months. No, this is 5-10 years of work already, fine-tuned because based on the American habits. You smell, taste differently than I do. What you can eat sometimes, the cake I can't swallow. Vice versa, you think, oh God, that's ugly medicine. And I say, okay, it's fine. Let's go a bit into detail in the second and last part of my talk. I want to tell you some ingredients and giving you some highlights here on this. So what we try to do is we want to give this immense woman and complete something for the basic of to feel healthy, to get some healthy stuff into your body. And of course you have taken vitamin pills. And there are wonderful results out there. There's only one big problem. If you want to do this here with the regular stuff, you have about 20-30 pills to swallow every day. And on the other side, many of these pills contain that amount of stuff that you pee yellow, like the B vitamins, and this is completely useful. So what we try really to fine-tune the whole thing. I'm not sure whether we are 100% done. It's up to you to tell us what we should improve. So we need your feedback to fine-tune over the years these products. So far what we decided, we have some minerals in it. We put in, that's what highlighted in blue, some vitamins in Q10 by our technology. We put in also ginseng root extract, also by our technology, also made from certified sources. And we end up with something where we believe it's a good mixture of vitamins, minerals, and cofactors to do so. You will not find vitamin A, but we stick to beta-carotene because we know that beta-carotene is much safer. You can't overdose it because your body is regulating the synthesis, the generation of vitamin A out of the beta-carotene himself. We put in cofactor Q10, and this is something very interesting. I can give you in the future. You will get a lot of background information which we will roll out in the next 4 to 6 weeks for the individual products, where you can read precisely why is CoQ10 so great. So when I studied medicine, most likely I have heard it in my biochemistry studies, but I completely forgot it. And then 3 years ago, I was exposed to Q10, and they were told me, hey Wolfgang, Q10 is good for this, it's good for that, it's good for that. And I said, yeah, I know this. This wonder miracles, this snake oils, everything is good for things. And I had a colleague in my pharmaceutical industry who highlighted, he was working on a very important mediator and trying to find inhibitor, and depending on the society he went to, whether it's breast cancer, inflammation, whatever, he highlighted in a different spot. At the end of the day, nothing worked out. And in CoQ10, I was thinking the same way, and I was completely wrong. Why I'm wrong? Because CoQ10 is the essential factor necessary for each and every cell, whether you do muscle work or liver detoxification or brain work, to generate ATP, which is the molecule in your body, which is the fuel, it's the gasoline for your cells. CoQ10 is essential in every cell to produce energy. Without CoQ10, there's no life. There are some rare diseases where they not fully have the mechanism. They suffer a lot on neurological disorders. CoQ10 is involved in the so-called respiratory chain in your little mitochondria, which are subparts of your cell, generating ATP. There are numerous studies out there showing that you can increase your cardiovascular function, your heart function. There are other reports out there indicating that you should eat it, especially when you take one of the ingredients Matthew mentioned, the statins, the most prescribed drug for lowering cholesterol. They also lower the production of CoQ10, and this is deleterious in these patients because they have this cardiovascular problem. And here's one thing, it's only one line. It prevents atherosclerosis, clearly shown in an animal model, in synergy to vitamin E. And now we come to some fundamental difference to pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals. In nutraceuticals, you are thinking holistic, which I like. I'm a physician. I have a patient. I'm not looking only on the liver or the left toe. I have the whole patient. If you look out on vitamin E, and this is a summary on various forms of vitamin E, let's say, then most of the studies fail. Because everybody is looking only on vitamin E. Nobody is looking on what the people really take. Nobody takes only vitamin E. Everybody takes something else. And in these animal studies, of course, you can be very precise. And they found that in synergy, these two molecules prevent the typical lesions of atherosclerosis. And one other thing is it improves the brain function, cognitive functions, very rapidly. And you will experience this when you drink here your energy shot. Most people immediately see an effect within minutes. It's not that they run faster in this 10 minutes, it's because their brain is suddenly more focused. That's something we realize and we know it. And on the other hand also, you can treat diseases. I have a very good colleague in Zurich. He is one of the leading migraine specialists. He's treating his patients with CoQ10 successfully. It's out there. But it has an effect in Alzheimer and other things. Many studies done. Half of them work, or maybe only 1 or 2 studies work. The others is, I tell you, most likely all these studies are crop. That's my conviction, because they were not properly formulated. They're using CoQ10 like it is, and then it's not fully resolved or not resolved at all. And then you can forget it. Another point, and then I stop here, is vitamin D. You all know vitamin D is necessary to strengthen your bone. When you do not have sun exposure, there's no production of vitamin D because it takes place on the sun in the skin from the precursors. Now, this is long known, 100 years. Or not, I'm not sure, when 30 years it was detected. However, in your body, cells talk to each other. They do this because they have certain things on your cell surface. We call it a receptor. It's like a key hole, and you come with the right key, then you can open the door. Which means if there's a receptor on a cell recognizing vitamin D in the blood, it grabs the vitamin D and says to the inside of the cell, hell, I have seen vitamin D. And boom, the cell is doing something very specific. It's running its program, what the cell is for. And now, imagine vitamin D is present on 83% of all our body cells. So it's by far not only the bone we are affecting with vitamin D. It's much, much more. It's the immune system. It's a cardiovascular system. It's a brain function partially. And vitamin D is not soluble in water. And the recommendations of vitamin D, what you should take, I can tell you, it's a joke. I mean, you can read papers. And it's a real joke, and it's a tragic joke. Because even I was thinking, okay, people in San Antonio and in Austin, they will not suffer from a deficiency on vitamin D like 30–40% of the American population may do. But I realized it's too hot to be outside in the sun, so people go inside. Maybe I'm completely wrong. So it's shown, and the recommendation is now to take vitamin D. How much you should take, you should be careful, you should supervise it. There are certain diseases out there. One of the most prevalent genetic disorder, cystic fibrosis, they have a huge deficit in vitamin D, and they dose it 1,000-fold higher than the regular dose you should take. Clinical studies are out there. So vitamin D, we make it soluble. We need 1 microliter of this vitamin D solubilizate for serving you for the day to be available.
You need how much?
1 microliter per day. It's the quality of our solubilizate. You can't see it. It's such a mini drop. So only to tell you what you can achieve in volumes for these things. Let's go to the next product, which is the second one we rolled out. It's the cleans. And the reason why we focused on our gastrointestinal tract is not because we think it's important how you digest. It's important. Of course, if you don't eat, you will die. That's one thing. But keep one thing in mind.
Well, then can we go back to the other product?
Sure.
What are some of the
benefits of, what are some of the people who are taking it, what are they seeing? I mean, like I have a lot of bariatric clients.
What you have geriatric?
They've had their stomach stapled.
Okay.
They're incredibly compromised when it comes to uptake of any vitamin and minerals, but especially any fat solubles.
Let's go back to this disease, cystic fibrosis. It's a disease by which you do not produce the appropriate slime, let's say. In the lung, you do not do it. You make a very tough slime, and the kids are all getting infections in the lung. And they have a problem with digestion. The same, and this problem is present not only in these people, it's also present in other diseases. It's called celiac disease. Or you find it when you have a chronic inflammation in the bowel. And they have all a reduced uptake of lipids. It's very, very often. You simply see it. You see when you measure this, if you do a micronutrient analysis, I don't know how many people, physicians are doing it here. I do it in Switzerland. We have a lab which is analyzing these things. They told me I should definitely eat immediately something. I'm not full of energy. I'm down because I had so low vitamin D level. I said, well, I compensated with my spirits, so maybe that helps. We'll see whether I get 100 years old or not. So in general, what is my current state of error is, with the aging population, you have lower uptake of lipids. When you have inflammation, you have a lower uptake of lipids, all shown. It has certain consequences how you feed yourself. And unfortunately, we do not feed ourselves properly, as I say, and don't misunderstand me, but the term American diet is something contradiction by itself. So diet in Germany means healthy stuff. Really, it's more medicine related, so it's completely wording here. But I don't believe that we grasp enough of fruit, of vegetables, and this type of things, and then you have to feed yourself. So I'm sure this is not really fully, I cannot fully answer the question, let me say these things. I believe only what I see, the prevalence of low uptake, low bioavailability, combined with low bioavailability is much higher than we think. Because it's, in my eyes, and this is described in literature, the process of aging is heavily dependent on uptake, for example, Q10, vitamin D, and this stuff. That's reports out there. You may question what is the validity behind it, but we can also wait up to the moment that the Earth is exploding because we don't believe it will happen. So let's be a bit proactive and let's design some studies to show it. So I think if you are 20 years or younger, you most likely may not use in this extent our product like the Complete. You may use it by other reasons to be more powerful, whatever. It's harmless, it's healthy, it's not toxic, that's for sure. In certain diseases you may need more, and especially when it affects your digestive tract. And I mean, we are saying if some, I mean, I don't know all the English expressions, but in German we say when you are in love, it's going via your stomach, so you function better, vice versa. You feel bad when you have a bowel disease because you do not absorb the right things. It's deep in our brain, evolution over millions of years. This system is important. I hope I answered a bit philosophical this question, which was, ask me further.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's just, as a practitioner, I want to...
You will experience, that's what we said, if you take the energy shot, you will envisage and you will see the effect within minutes. With a Complete, I don't think that you will all see this in a minute, but you will see it in a very short period of time, that you feel better, that you feel that you can do more, that you perform better. We have one product on market which is the energy shot in a tough way. We cannot sell it to anybody because it is so expensive. We made it in our pharmacy and friends and families get it. I tell you, it's crazy. When you give it to sports people or when you give it to other people, to friends, they say, hey, what's with grandfather? He's suddenly talking. He's suddenly taking part in the whole story again. Because they change, you change the micronutrients. You change the whole thing. And one thing I wanted to say, going further in this detail, when you just put the question, the intestinal tract is not only the digestive tract. It's the huge surface, bigger than the skin, exposed to the outside world. And it is your most important and biggest immune organ. The whole intestinal tract is surrounded by immune cells, Peyer's plaques, lymph nodes. everything, bacteria are caught there. Reaction in the systemic things. Many of the nutraceuticals, I'm convinced, experience the effect not because they show up in the blood, because they are already heavily metabolized somewhere else. They express their performance by reacting on the local immune system in the intestinal tract, and this further on goes and triggers certain cascades. So you have to be very careful how you treat your intestinal tract. And that's the reason why we do here two things. We put in milk thistle and frankincense. Frankincense, I showed you a bit of the arachidonic acid and all the stuff in the inflammation. Frankincense is doing and inhibiting another pathway in this area. I was surprised to read this on a thing which I worked and had never an inhibitor. I could have taken this. It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory agent. It has certain other effects which are not fully elucidated. Milk thistle, containing so-called silimarine, is a very powerful hepatoprotectant. It protects the liver. It helps detoxifying certain things. There are a lot of literature around. It's very difficult to find it in a total, in really nice clinical trials, but you can definitely say in alcohol intoxication, chronic alcohol intoxication, you get a benefit. Fibrotic changes in the liver, which is the so-called liver cirrhosis at the end of the day, you can prevent this. It's out there. It is not soluble in water, these both ingredients. The other thing is you have to keep your intestinal tract in motion. These three compounds should do it. You should prevent the growth of the wrong bacteria. You have a lot of bacteria in your intestinal tract. And you know, peppermint. One thing is your olfactory system makes you happy. You like peppermint. Most people like it. It has also an effect. It's anti-inflammatory and it works on the motility. So you combine these things together. And okay, so I told you this story. You can go into more details. Let's come to the end of the product, which is the Energy Plus, and I think Lawrence distributed it already, so you are all awake. As I see, nobody is sleeping. Oh, great. It's because of the energy shot. And this was the idea, really, to find something which is not another energy shot, not another Red Bull, not another this or this wonderful. I saw it here now in the US television, this sheriff, whatever he's doing. Yeah, the 5 hours. The lady who is exploding in front of a guy, and the guy is shocked. You don't want that you are shocked when you see a nice lady, and vice versa. So what we try to do, we try to combine real things, how they should work. And this is something where I really ask you to, in the company, to bring in your experience. There's CoQ10, which works in my eyes very rapidly. There's natural caffeine, sorry, it's wrongly spelled, I forgot to change this, and L-theanine, which is very interesting. L-theanine is something in the green tea. And what is figured out, it can balance the reaction between both. So it is not overshooting, making yourself nervous, shivering or whatever, but you balance it in the right way. There are some really nice behavioral studies out when you combine it properly, especially together with ginseng and choline. I want to stress a bit the ginseng. The ginseng, the Siberian ginseng, was developed in Russia because they wanted to make the factory workers workable and calm them down. This was, and cheap. They had no money in Russia in the revolutionary, wonderful communistic times. And the ginseng, they were claiming it's increasing the performance. You find a lot of things in the literature about ginseng. The problem is it doesn't increase really the performance, at least the data are not out there. Because, first of all, in my eyes, it's not really properly done and made bioavailable. But what you find is something very interesting. You can really, it is a so-called adaptogen. You adapt to stress better. And it protects your immune system. Now coming to someone who is constantly under fire and working like hell. And there are some sports guys doing marathon, triathlon, and whatever. And if you look to these people directly after they run, directly after they exercise, their immune system is, they should be on intensive care unit. It's like septic shock. No, a lot of people, you have this sudden death within the 2-3 days of an event. I mean, this is because your immune system is completely shut off. It's overrun, and you have parameters as you find it. I have dealt with septic patients. I analyze them forth and back and whatever. And you find the same thing after a marathon run. And ginseng can prevent this. Choline is important, the most important lipid for brain development. So there's some stuff there where I hope we do not have only a great taste. We give the energy, but we are a bit different. I'm not aware of any energy shot having CoQ10 in it. And so we try to bring you in power, but you balance out that you can relax again. Anyway, these are the first 3 products. And I hope in the next month we will have the Super Omega with all the things I described to you. We will profile this in a way that we want to highlight these cardiovascular properties. Later on we may develop out of this something for joint pain, for other inflammatory conditions. We will see how you feel with these products. And coming to an end, I want to show you a bit more of Davos. First, where it is. You see here this little town. It's full of snow. And it has an interesting history, and I want to share it with you. It's in Germany. It's very, very well known because of the Nobel laureate Thomas Mann, who lived actually during the Nazi time. He escaped and lived in California. And he wrote a wonderful novel which is called The Magic Mountain, which is actually taking place in Davos. And I recommend to read you. It's one of the most famous German literature. And it's describing the therapy of tuberculosis, because Davos was known for tuberculosis treatment. Nowadays, of course, you can do it in Austin. You don't have to go to the mountains. But at this time, in the pre-antibiotic area, there was nothing. And Thomas Mann's wife died or suffered from tuberculosis. And he took the time, and he was there for months in this wonderful old hospitals where the people were simply sitting outside in the clean, crisp air of Davos. And actually today, the center, for example, of the Dutch Society for Asthma is in Davos. Only it's the first thing when you enter the village, you will see. Nowadays, they have the Economic World Forum, and unfortunately, it's very small printed. Well, it's something which you take eventually also home here. It's accelerating the transition towards sustainable investing. And we should invest into our health. And we do this by the great help of my co-workers. You see here Hans-Peter Strobel. I mentioned his name. He is a pharmacist. He is the mastermind behind all this. Peter Koller is our head of production in Davos. And you guess what is his profession? He's a cook. It's important. And we have on the other side a laboratory for the analytics. And these are my co-workers, Ilse Knöller and Helge Dinkler, where we do a lot of development of new solubilizates and analytical procedures. This resides in Düsseldorf. This keeps me always 500, 800 kilometers on the road to bridge the gap. But it's much better to keep the people in Austin, in Düsseldorf, and Davos, and let them work where they belong to, where they are happy, rather than to say only come together, come to Davos, and only there's a treatment. And with these words, I thank you very much for the attention. I'm eager to learn from you all the questions, well, what I missed, and shoot on me. I will try my best to answer it.
Are all of your supplements in liquid form for better absorption?
Yes. We have at the moment no solid form. We know that we could do it, but we want to stay with the liquid form. As I said, we can combine much more of the things, and our technology allows us to combine vitamins in a way that or other stuff that they don't interact with each other. So if you cage them, they are protected, which is very important. I mean, to give certain natural extracts, they are already destroyed in the stomach by the acidic environment. With our micelle technology, we can avoid this completely. They are stable there.
What is it sweetened with?
Pardon me?
What is it sweetened with? Why is it sweetened?
Our natural sweetener, we don't have, we have sugar sometimes, non-diabetogenic sugars, so you can safely use it as a diabetes patient. So some xylitol, some other stuff, but not this chemical sweetness. Stevia is sometimes in. This was a big debate because in Europe stevia was only allowed right now. And here in US it's all out there. In Switzerland it was out there, but not in Germany. It's crazy world. But we're using, you will find that it is natural sweetness what we use. Give me some hard days, I tell you. We can make nice things with chemistry, but we don't want to do it.
On that Swiss study you did with the sports people, you said 28 days later their stress response came down. Did you factor in or factor out the effect of Swiss and German beer?
You mean on the investigator?
Yeah. Yeah, manipulate the data there.
It works, regardless how much I have drunk. We are, to be honest, let's say our technology, and I have no data for it, but from principle, we are much less affected by food than any other technology, because simply things are protected, and we know now that people can eat it without food. We don't need the bile salts for making it available, so we don't need all this. Usually you will find recommendation on some nutraceutical products, they say take it with a meal. The reason is because of formulation. So you should take some fats, really triglycerides and this stuff to get it done. This we don't need.
Actually, serious question now. How is your technology of the forming the micelles unique or different from other, micelle technology that's really out there?
Right. So I wouldn't stand here if there wouldn't be a difference, because in principle you could do it with any other technology. I'm also sometimes wondering why nobody is really doing it. I'm not aware of any company using micelle technology really completely. They start with one or the other ingredients. I haven't seen anything with frankincense. I haven't anything with some natural extracts, some herbs and these type of things.
No, they're usually with single isolate products.
Right. So, and then it's running out of costs, simply like this. We are able now to combine even various things we want to solubilize in one pot, which is...
Are you aware of any essential difference in the technology?
Yeah, the essential difference is also partially highlighted in the patent, which is published, that we have a glue in the middle of the whole thing, which is a resin. So we use a glue which keeps the whole thing together. And then it doesn't fall apart. It's a critical micelle concentration. This is what I told you, that you fall apart when you dilute your usual micelles. This doesn't happen. And I did it in my lab, that we analyzed some other stuff from some competitors which simply wasn't stable. And ours was stable.
Can you say more about the resin, or is that just...
I mentioned some. In some products you have in front of them, but it's very broad. We know also the specific ingredients. Meanwhile, we figured this out. We will see how we deal with this in the future. I do not want to answer more on this because I want to protect simply the company.
We could tell you, but you couldn't leave the room.
Okay. Without my tongue, right? Why the D-alpha tocopherol as opposed to just a pure D isomer or mixed tocopherol?
I was awaiting this question. It's a good question. Actually, we started with D-alpha tocopherol. I mean, we have a certain, so for the rest of the audience, the term vitamin E is promiscuous. It covers a lot of molecules which are very similar to each other, like your left hand and right hand. They are more or less the same, but they are left and right. You cannot bring them in the same thing. You can only do this. So these are subtle differences in the vitamin E chemistry. So we use vitamin E not only to have the biological effects in a cell on this, which is only seen, let's say, by the left hand. The right hand, for example, wouldn't do anything with the receptor, with the cell. But we use also the inherent technical capabilities of vitamin E in the process. It's an antioxidant. And many of these products, many of these excipients, many of the natural stuff, they have highly volatile, highly sensitive matters. Flavonoids, flavones, chemically, they nearly fall apart when you touch them. And by the presence of enough of this left and right hand, we can protect them. That's the reason why we stayed with DL. I'm aware of certain studies going in gamma tocopherol and using this. This is actually good. We will take this and we may come up with a second generation integrating this. Simply we have to start from something, and I was digging deep now to find the right solution, and we know only that we have a long year experience with the tocopherol, simply like this. If we would add this, I'm sure we have to change the process again, which we will do. We need some more sales, let's say, to wrap it up, and then of course that's exactly what we want to do. We want to have some more feedback from you, what we should bring up in a product for a specific purpose doing this. There are nice results out there in cardiovascular diseases and gamma tocopherol. Maybe we do a cardio product, we'll integrate gamma tocopherol. It may not be necessary in the energy shot, for example.
Well, maybe you don't need to have as much, so product cost
right.
is down.
There's some stuff in the krill oil, astaxanthin, which is something, and we successfully did it. It's very funny if you look then in what is really astaxanthin stated in the products you get from the raw materials. It's a lot of different other things.
Actually, that's an interesting question. And since you're here as a manufacturer, I kind of stopped using krill and fish oils somewhat because I don't know. Some companies, they don't tell you where they get their krill. Is it Antarctic? Is it Pacific Ocean? Now with Fukushima and radiation.
And I tell you, there's a huge battle in patents between the company. It's muddy water, and you're totally right. The only thing what we could do is we get a spec sheet, we get analytical data sheet, we have intensive collaboration with the producers of the stuff, and our stuff is not from Fukushima, to be precise. It's from.
Let me, if I can answer that one too. Krill is the krill that's available in the market. There's 4 producers of it, major producers. They all buy their krill from the same exact boats. And all of it is harvested in 2 weeks from the Antarctic, from a certain region in one bay. They can only fish it or harvest it from this one. It all goes into Argentina, and it's all processed there and goes out to these 4 companies. And everybody in the world that sells krill buys it from these 4 companies. They're very tightly regulated because it's a very sensitive.
Well, it's an interesting thing because 4 weeks ago when I pulled up my, on the internet, Google News came up and it said they found tuna fish off of California at 14 times the amount of radioactivity that was accepted. And of course, this is not going to be publicized because the whole tuna industry would go downhill if that actually became being used. But then I started thinking, well, what about all the omega-3s we're getting from fish and and then the krill oil? So
Well, krill comes from clear down.
But in principle, you are right. We spoiled the oceans and everything. I mean, I remember the times of Chernobyl. I can tell you, I was contaminating my radioactive lab by walking in, not by walking out. Yeah. So you couldn't work. Everything was going. Did you ever looked at this time to your cleaning system in your car? I can tell you we did this analysis. I mean, this is what we did to our Earth. I mean, this Fukushima event will impact certainly fish industry and other things. We are sensitive to this. I believe the producers are highly sensitized to it and will differentiate and will make it sure. And we can only say what we do, we get from everything what we get. First of all, we start with pharmaceutical quality. When we buy things, for example, it has already another standard what we do. And we get, for example, ginseng. I mean, I want to be sure that we have no heavy metals in it and all this stuff and these type of things. Propolis is a real problem to get good propolis quality. And you have to do it. And that's one of the, how to say, entrance criteria before they enter the room. And we bought, for example, some tocopherol from China recently. This was unbelievable what they were sending us. So from we rejected it from the canister we got. I mean, this was as if someone has used all the dishwater already and whatever. It was unbelievable quality. You have to be very sensitive, and we don't want. I mean, the price we pay here for a product, it's not a cheap product. It's because we have a technology in between. It costs some price. We keep it, the more we develop, we can keep it under control, but also having good ingredients. We may not agree always on the same why to use this amount and that amount or this one. That's certainly true. Somewhere you have to start, and we want to improve. Sorry.
So the technology increases absorption of fat-soluble nutrients from 10% to 90% plus. So the body can absorb internally the nutrients that the products that we have now. Can you address the future of like the skincare products? Is that absorption rate similar? And how does that apply to skincare products?
First, let me correct a bit. I mean, I cannot fully say that we are going up to 90%. When I came to the Swiss company doing the technology, they all told me it's 100% bioavailability, and I told them, hey, show me your IV data, your intravenous data, and nobody has it. And people are talking crop when they tell you something. What we can only do is to compare to others. Unformulated material, because most of the nutraceuticals are not available except some certain vitamin preparations for intravenous comparison, and then you are lost in space technically. And the skin is the same problem. The skin is a very interested organ. I was doing a lot of killing of fungi. This was my job at Bayer, to kill not only bacteria and increase the immune system, but I had a love to kill fungi. And dermatological infections are most often fungal infections, yeast with epidermophytes and these things. And try to make a real animal model. Our skin is different from all other animals because we have a much more water-friendly skin. We have sweat glands. Almost all other animals don't have it. And therefore, it's not always what we perceive that we have to use oily liquids to prevent dehydration or something like that. I think that is not completely true. I think you have to bring in water, you have to go through the water, you have to absorb. And so we are able to make gels where otherwise you have to use an oily basic cream. That's one thing. We can make really crystal clear gels. So our next product, for example, one of them will be a very powerful thing in cellulite treatment. I can in cellulite. I promise you, we have clinical. We have. I'm sorry for my bad English, broken English, the most common language. We have clinical data which are unbeatable. I have never, and the institute told us they have never seen this data. It's a collaboration with another company from Freiburg, and this out there. This will come in third quarter. So I'm a man. I hate when my mother was giving me sun cream and oily things in my face. I remember as a child, I hate this creaming. So, and I don't know how you feel if you would have an oily ass the whole time. So that's only to give you an idea. You can absorb it, it works, and you have certain advantages. Of course, the cosmetics functions a bit different than the nutraceutical industry. And we are very keen to do so, but our Swiss company has at least the same amount of experience in nutraceutical as we have it in cosmetics over the year. Because also Davos is very dry. So what you use there in cream is completely different as you use it in the valley, because you need it there. You have a lot of sun. And it will be a rollout of 4 products, adapting exactly the same mechanism, solubilizates. Think about that you prevent destruction from light much better when it is micellized. Everybody tried with liposomes and this type of stuff, which didn't work because it's simply unstable. Other companies, for example, used vitamin K for treatment of the spiders. The problem was they need such a high amount of vitamin K that you affect your blood clotting system. So that's the reason why they couldn't pursue it anymore. We use in our products much less. So there will be very interesting things coming out. I know I'm overrunning the time. I
could listen to Dr. Wolfgang for hours myself.
We can too.
Yeah, and he'll be here as long as you'd like him to be right after this initial presentation is over, to ask him more questions, even some tougher ones if you have them.
Can I just say one thing?
Go ahead, Tom. You have a question.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Because I hate interrupting, but one thing about this company, which is why I jumped on board so quick, is the vitamin D emphasis. I have my vitamin D checked every year when I get a physical, and I'm telling you right now, if you don't take a supplement of any kind, and you're not getting 40 or 50 minutes of sun on 40 or 50% of your body every day, you're going to be extremely deficient in vitamin D. I bet 90% of the people in this room are deficient on vitamin D. Very, I mean, drastically.
Is that right? 90%?
Oh, I bet.
And I just read today that the FDA is trying to regulate vitamin D, like they do raw milk.
Well, they really did. Our tax dollars are going good calls.
I mean, the one thing is that you have not natural milk anymore here. Whenever I see it's either skim or it's vitamin D or whatever. So we are changing our food, and as I said, we are not made for people like me having gray hairs. You are 22 years, I'm 25 years. You need something, and that's the whole story. You want to be healthy. I don't want to be, let's say, I'm still running like maniac. And sometimes my daughter tries to beat me. My son did it some years ago in running faster, so okay, I can accept it. So, but I want to stay healthy when I'm 60, when I'm 70. And I see that many things you can prevent when you start early enough. We are not made for 120, but definitely we can make much better life in chronic diseases and chronic conditions over the time. And one, for example, if you can reduce inflammatory things, it means pain. Do you know what it means when a patient has everyday pain? Can you imagine this? It changes everything. So try to do it with a nutraceutical, not only with powerful anti-pain relief or pain relievers.
Thank you, Dr.